Heart of Oak is brought to you by Timberland Pro, Marvin Windows and Doors, Midcape and AZEC Trim,
and these valued partners.
So I bought the first Glades project, which was a really skinny one in the middle. But then once we got into it, we realized the apartment building was for sale and the owner owned both properties. And they approached us and said, hey, if you're gonna buy this one, why don't you buy the apartment building as well? Then about a week later, the owner in the back who owned the rear unit and the one on the left at 83 called me and said, well, hey, would you wanna buy these two? Because we're considering selling them. So I met with him. I put that deal together. So now all of a sudden I have four. So I went in to buy one lot for 150 grand, and now I'm spending, well over $1 million on four.
Clearly the Glaze project was very substantial, right? It was 5 separate dwellings across 4 buildings. It was a really unique and innovative subdivision of the land.
This project, wow, is all I can say. It was a huge undertaking for us. So we had 2 row houses, a building with 2 units in it, and then we have a single family build on the property as well. Massive, massive project. I don't know that anybody really knew what we were getting into when we started. It was one of those things that it just kept developing over time.
So it was really fun and interesting to see it all happen. And now we got to start planning the final Glades project. And that's the rear unit at Glades.
As we wrapped up these 3 homes up front, we also had the lot in the back. This whole project from the beginning, we knew that there would be 4 structures, but the one in the rear is a stick-built home and definitely a little bit more of a custom build.
This is a 3,500 square foot single family house. So the biggest of everything. It's super tall. It's 40 feet in the air.
That's the last sonnet. That is the last song that Oak's gonna write on that property, and it's exciting because it's a stick build. It's something that we're building ground up this time. It's our final countdown.
The way that I looked at it was we worked with an architect to draw it out. And I remember doing that and sitting down, and it was really cool to be able to have the freedom to figure out what we wanted this specific build to look like. The really great thing about it is over the year or so that we had to design the 3 front houses, I was able to really see the seasonal changes down at Glades and be there through all 4 seasons and kind of like take in the view and see what it was gonna look like in the rear where we were gonna be building this stick-built house. And so that had a lot of influence on how we ended up designing this home. It was also something that we knew we were not going to start building until we sold the units up front.
What's great about this is we learned all our lessons and made all our mistakes in the process of building something on stilts in the first 3. So at the same time that I'm doing the front, I'm putting the septic in the back so that I can get ahead of the site work there so that once we're done with the front, we can then start setting poles in the back. Really now it's about putting piles in and building up. And one of the decisions we've made with this house is to stick build it, not modularly build it. Now, the main reason is we have nowhere to put a crane. So we've got piles going in momentarily, and we're just gonna start cranking away.
It's not any tougher than any of the other builds that we do, putting houses on pilings. We've done it other times, but it just adds a different factor to the build. We're not pouring a traditional foundation with a footing and framing off of that. We are now pile driving piles into the earth and having to set the timbers exactly right so everything's level and then working off of that frame.
The piles will go in the same way they did in the front. I don't anticipate any problems because we had no problems up front as far as them hitting ledge too early or any of that. New England is really funky when it comes to what's in the ground. You could have a fully sandy lot in one end of town and on the other end of the town have to bring a hammer. It's really unique depending on where you are, what you're gonna hit. And in this case, it's all sand, which has worked out really well. But yeah, they'll go in the same way. They'll vibrate them down. And then at the end, they'll use a hammer to get them down right to the very bottom, clip the tops, put the frame on it, and we build from there. Got to Glades early to dig a conduit line for one of our past projects. Today, My plan is to get these beams back on. They had left them loose for us so that we could work inside here to get a water line in. And then we're gonna spread as much gravel as I have here underneath here to get it prepped and do our final grading underneath because we got lumber coming tomorrow. I was trying to work solo lifting this beam up to get it in place, but you really need two guys so one guy can kind of direct it in. Otherwise, it kind of flops around. But we just got to get it back in place, and then they're coming back and throwing the bolts in it. I got the conduit lines dug, but we're right above the gas lines. So I want to make sure that we do the rest by hand. But first, I'm going to have you help me lift these timbers up and try to do it myself, and it's a no-go, one person. So we'll put this one up, then we'll do this one, and then we'll put the last one up.
Okay.
And we'll be done by lunchtime.
Of course. I gotta start like a day before, just to catch up with you.
You like that balance?
Yep,
Okay.
perfect.
All right, going up.
Hold it right there.
So maybe we could get that side in, like you push down. Which way?
Just down, slowly. We're in.
The cleanest one yet, right there.
Outstanding.
Nice. That's how it's done. Gentlemen, the beams are back in place and ready for through bolts and cross bracing. Well, I definitely learned my lessons with the first couple Glades projects. You know, these were our first pile projects. So there's a lot of little things you got to get done ahead of framing under the build. If you don't get done now, you screw yourself later. So we learned our lesson over there. Now in the back, we're going to be much more efficient, get it done much faster. The back house to me was always more of the custom house. We were pushing the envelope a little more with the price and a little more with the finishes just because it's 3,500 square feet. It's got a 4-car garage underneath it. It's kind of the big deal house in the neighborhood.
Rear house in the back, it's a single family home and it's the largest home there. It's the showcase house at the Glades. It's gonna be a fun one because it's the only stick framed house we're doing back there ground up. And we're able to go in there and make all the selections from the start and really hone in on that oak touch. Whereas, you know, we were able to put that in the other modulars, but at the end of the day, they came 75% pre-assembled to us. It's truly a magnificent build and it's all set up on pilings.
I think the goal was to create something really unique and special, something that really stood out in the neighborhood and that completed that little subdivision and really kind of rounded it out. I think the goal was to go for broke on this one. Like we cut our chops in the front and now we're going all in on the back. I thought originally that this was gonna be an 18-month project. I was out to lunch with that prediction because I'm at 2 years right now. It's just been tough with the labor shortages and the delays. You know, we used to be able to get some products in 2 weeks that now take 24. But I think it's all about getting ahead of it, thinking ahead, making sure you're ordering things early, getting guys on early, staying on top of guys to make sure they're there. That's the hardest part of our job, is keeping the ball rolling at a clip that keeps the money flowing. On a spec house and you're using construction loans, you only make money when you finish things. You don't get to pull draws until work is done. So if the ball starts to roll slow, your cash flow goes backwards.
When timing is not on, that's a huge challenge because not only do we have bank draws coming in based on progress that's already happened? We have interest payments to pay out. We have debt that we have to take care of every single month. For every month your project is overdue, that is, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars out of your pocket that you're not gonna see if we don't see progress fast enough in order to pull a bank draw.
So what people don't realize is that we're building these houses, right? And it's not all just cash I have in the bank, right? I'm using banks like South Shore Bank and other banks, and those banks have a bank draw with me. So I have a bunch of money sitting in an account, and I can pull money out of it as things are complete. So for example, I have a certain amount of money in the budget for the framing of this house behind me, but I can only pull that as stages when items are done. So I've already pulled a good chunk on framing, and until I have the second floor walls up, I really can't pull more money, but I need to pull money because I gotta pay for all that lumber that's on the ground. In order to get those second floor walls up, we did have a discrepancy in some of the framing. So we had to kind of make an executive decision on the fly as to what to do. So as we know, I have a bank to make happy.
Yeah.
And I wanna call on a draw
Yeah.
to get some money in, but I really need to have second floor walls on in order to call for my next draw, which I know is only a day or two of work. So you had raised a question about how we're gonna build this second floor. So what do you need?
On this rendering here, it's showing a 2x10 floor joist. And then if you go to the actual framing plan, it's showing 2x12s, which we need for the to hide these LVLs.
We definitely have to go with the framing plan.
With the framing plan, correct. We take 2 inches out of the top floor here. It will match this second floor, and then we'll gain those 2 inches of the floor joist.
So this is a perfect example of a field change that we'll make on the fly here. So that's number one. Number two, Mike looked at the way that the exterior walls were framed, and he decided the easiest way to frame that gable wall was to do the whole wall for the second and third floor all at once. Right here. You come out to these load points. It's not a lot of load, so you could put a poster here, right? Yeah. Okay. So I just have to come up with a price to make it bigger.
Okay. It's money.
Yeah, it's money. Exactly.
Dinero.
Dinero. Lots of dinero. Okay. Sounds good. High five. Nice work. The build on this one was really fun because A, we're really high, but then B, it's a big house and it's up on piles, so it just seems that much more dramatic every floor you go. And when we got to that third floor and we started putting those walls up, we ended up building the wall of the third floor and the gable of the end of the roof all at once and stood it all at one time, which is not necessarily conventional, especially being as big as it was. But it was the way to do it in that application. And when that thing went up, it just fully defined the shape of the house. And it was kind of that turning point of, okay, everything that we had envisioned on paper this last 2 years of building this little neighborhood has finally come together. Like it's all come into place. It was an exciting moment to see that one wall go up. So this looks amazing.
Yeah, when I pulled in, they were putting up that wall.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
It looks really big because you have 2 floors of that wall.
they move so fast.
I know, it's nuts. Look at this guy.
Yeah.
It is insane how fast these guys are moving. It's really impressive, actually. Having framed houses, my dad and I were way slower than that.
Yeah, I believe it.
Every floor, like you stand on the piles, you're like, oh, okay, we're getting somewhere. And then you stand on the next floor and you're like, oh, the views are pretty good. Then you got on the next floor and you're like, whoa, these views are really good. So it just gets better and better and better as you go. It's just really fun. I don't know if I'll build something like that again for a while. I always say it's easy to sell before or after. In the middle, it's really hard, right? But when you're working off of renderings and blueprints, people can envision it on paper to a point where they feel comfortable making an offer. But once the structure's up, it's really hard to get people to understand what's going on. And this one, we were able to do that. This one, we were able to take a buyer halfway through and they saw the vision and understood it. And so we've actually pre-sold it, which is pretty great. And now we're just cruising to get it done so we can turn it over and move on. What's cool is it's sold.
I know.
Purchase and sale
I
was
know.
sold yesterday, was
I know.
signed
So I'm
yesterday.
working on the layout of the kitchen that I had originally done before we had a buyer, because they are gonna select some different appliances.
Yeah.
So I just am moving some things around for them, but it's coming along.
You know, another commonality with Oak Builds is we start them as specs and then they turn into customer jobs, which adds a whole nother complexity to the mix. You know, we have everything predetermined, pre-selected, we have our own timeline, and then when you add a client to the mix, we start changing things, adding things. We want a roof deck, now we want a fireplace. It's not new to us. You know, we know how to dodge, pivot, and make it happen. It's good to have this property sold. It's great for the books, right? We're getting cash flow in, we're able to start more projects, but it adds another complexity for Lizzy, PJ, myself, and the timeline. You know, homeowners want to get into their home. They got to sell their current property or they're looking for a property, and we got to hit that deadline.
I think one of the things that's going to be interesting about this project is the roof deck ladder. So I've talked about doing it in steel. I've never built a ladder like that up to a roof deck. So that's kind of a wild card. Well, what I thought about doing was metal and just put treads on it. Just screw it from under, you know.
Make a tread.
The client came to us asking to do a coffered ceiling in the living room. Now, that's something that was kind of perfect timing because the trim guys were just wrapping up with the stairs and, you know, all the interior trim work.
This room is probably the most complicated. We want to do a coffer ceiling in here. Coffer ceiling? Yeah, but a shallow one, not very deep.
And believe it or not, adding this coffered ceiling actually benefits the build. Currently, we have a plumbing stack pipe that's running right across the middle of the living room. And we were trying to figure out how we can hide this thing. And now that we're adding a coffered ceiling, we've actually taken the measurements to figure out how we can hide that pipe in a box in the coffered ceiling. So, you know, within the next 2-3 days, you're not even gonna know that there's a plumbing stack pipe in that ceiling.
The special thing about this area where Glades is that you have Minot Beach, which is directly across the street from these units. But in this rear home specifically, the whole back side of the house is this gorgeous, uninterrupted view of a marsh. We really wanted to capture the back and this huge, beautiful marsh view. So in the house, it's really focused towards the rear. The kitchen faces the marsh, all windows on that wall, big sliding door in the living room. And then the same thing kind of as you go up the 3 floors of this home, as you walk through, you see that it's all windows facing the back. And I think that we did that really nicely. The other thing is we decided to put a roof deck on this house because A, it's just as high as all the other ones, and it has that same gorgeous view of both the ocean and the marsh.
So we jumped from these front modulars back to the stick build in the back. We had to incorporate that oak aesthetic throughout. So in doing so, we used a lot of AZAC here, keep it consistent throughout the properties. You know, the Marvin windows, black frame windows. Now without those, it's not an oak build.
We have the ability to do a lot more custom details because it isn't a modular home and we're doing everything from beginning to end. Some cool details that are happening in this house, there's gonna be a coffered ceiling in the living room area, which is a really large sprawling space on the first floor. The kitchen is pretty unbelievable. It has this gorgeous view again of the marsh, and we're gonna really step up a lot of the lighting elements in the house. We have added a lot of not only the normal overhead lighting, but decorative lighting with pendants and sconces throughout the house in hallways and staircases and accent lights in the kitchen and things like that. This house again is 3 floors. So we have multiple bathrooms that we're designing. There's a bar on the 3rd floor that then is kind of like right off of the stairs that will lead to the roof deck. So this house is really special. It's definitely unique with the way that the living space is laid out.
This was as much of building something fun as it was to like actually do my first Situate house. I definitely think now that we've kind of put our stake into Situate that we'll have a lot more coming our way that direction. I've had some people approach me about other properties already. I definitely think Situate is a great town to invest in. I think the success of this neighborhood has positioned us very well to do more in that town.
Situate's a really special place, especially Minot Point, where we did this build at Glades. It's a very tight community, but right on the beach. It's highly desirable, and it's really only accessible if you live in the neighborhood. It's accessible to the public, but it's hard to park. So unless you live there, it's kind of this little jewel that not a lot of people know about. And if you do know about it, you're lucky. And if you live there, you're even luckier.
I'm not super excited about getting into another one of those for a while. I think that it was a great project. We learned a lot, but at the same time, just the sheer volume of the job, the financing on the job, everything was just a lot. But it's definitely been a great learning experience for us. And I think the next time that we do it, it'll just be a little bit easier, you know, because we've done it before and we know what we're getting into. We cut our teeth on that one for sure.
We feel very fortunate to have been able to work in a neighborhood like the Glades neighborhood. It's extremely unique. There are not a lot of neighborhoods like that where you're seeing these new builds happening or where you're seeing them happen quickly. It's a challenging area, But I think that we were really lucky to be able to get our hands on these properties and build the homes that we did. We've learned a lot as far as, working in a tight space or building modular again or doing a development. So we've got a lot of new sort of tools under our belt, if you will.
I mean, every single job teaches you how to do a better job the next one, right? Learn, move on, don't make that mistake again. It's like my motto. There's no substitute for experience. There just isn't. My dad used to always say that as a joke, but he was totally right. It's like every job we learn a little more. And all I ask from my employees and my subcontractors is that every job, just learn a little more. And if you make a mistake, that's fine. I don't care. It doesn't matter how much money it is. Don't make it again.
We started this whole entire project at the Glades about 2 years ago. And you fast forward to 2023 and we've got all these properties. To accomplish this task, it took all the effort of everybody at Oak and our entire team, all of our subcontractors. And it's gonna be kind of bittersweet to leave the Glades, but it feels rewarding to kind of close a chapter here at Glades and get ready to open up a new one.
To say that we completed this project in a flood zone with special health code permits, special zoning permits, on piles, in the tightest neighborhood possible is just awesome. The fact that we came out, we made money, we didn't lose money, we were able to get out ahead. What more could you ask for?